Hello and welcome to another episode of this. Okay, minute. Start over. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. You know, folks, the pace of change. Now, I'm going to just kind of riff a little bit here. The pace of change has accelerated exponentially, it seems, such that today we are literally driven to keep up with the rate of change. And the problem with change isn't so much the change itself. It's the disruption to relationships that change causes. And we're continually having to recalibrate our relationships with things that are in our lives. And that can lend itself to a whole lot of stress. You know, living a driven life. You know, we've got ideas of success. We've got ideals of success. And there's a whole lot of pressure to be successful, to drive towards that outcome. Not healthy. Not healthy. The human organism isn't wired for what we put it into in many cases. And I mean literally put it into. We put it into an environment that's rife with pressure. We put it into systems and situations where expectations oftentimes are very unrealistic. And if we fall off the expectation curve, the feeling of I failed kind of gets bundled into that. I am my results. And if the results are designed to be produced on not a quarterly basis anymore, but almost on a weekly, daily basis. So that kind of pressure, you can sustain it short term, but you certainly can't sustain it for the long haul. Which is why I'm excited to have April Chavez with us today. April is a performance coach, and she's founder and CEO of an organization, a company called Driven Livin. And I was honored to be on her show not too long ago, and I was absolutely struck by just the way that she positions this conversation about how do I live a healthy life in the midst of what society and everything else seems to be requiring of me. And if we put this in the context of the soul of business, the soul of anything doesn't appreciate prodding. It's got its own life cycle to it. And the continual stimulation ends up creating scar tissue. And a lot of us have scar tissues around our souls. Our businesses have scar tissue around that original founding principle that inhibits what it is that we do. So the idea here of a driven living, the idea here of a wellness-driven life as opposed to a success-driven life, there's a distinction there that I want to invite us to explore today. And I want to invite you as the listener to really appreciate what April's bringing to the table here, because it is, I think it's relatively unique in a number of different ways. So April, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Blaine, so much for having me here with you today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for saying yes.
That's an easy yes, Blaine.
Okay. I'm going to just start with, there's a question that I typically ask on the show, and it's really the only formal question that I've got for us is, when you hear the term the soul of business, what does that evoke for you, particularly given your particular historical perspective on life, but also what you do with Driven Livin? The idea of the soul of business.
So I don't know if my perspective on that would be a little different from others, but when I first heard that, I thought it was wonderful, because with my own show this year in particular, we are really striving to go towards spiritual evolution. And so when we talk about us on the human level as far as the spiritual, intellectual, physical aspects of ourselves, that spiritual piece tends to fall off the way, it falls off, right? Especially within business. And why is it that we don't have discussions about our spiritual aspects, our soul aspect of business? And so when I hear that, it excites me because that's exactly where I want the conversations to be going.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel that we can have discussions about that. And to me, if you say that we're not spiritual or we don't have this soul aspect of ourselves, it's like saying that we don't have skin, because we're spiritual, energetic beings. And so it is just an essence of us that is very important to hone in on. In fact, I would venture to say that it is the most important piece that we are missing.
Thank you for that. I could not agree with you more. The idea of a spiritual life has been polluted, and I mean very specifically polluted with religious connotations and admonitions about doing things in a proscribed sort of a way. And at the end of the day, spirituality, and I mean spirituality in the broadest sense of the word, is really about aliveness. Yeah, bringing life to what it is that I do, bringing life to this expression that is using me or using my business as a vehicle. Every one of us is unique. Every business is unique. And how that uniqueness gets expressed is a function of spirituality. And if we cap it, if we ignore it, there's no expression. There's no unique expression, and we end up becoming just either automatons or poor copies of somebody else's idea. With your driven living philosophy, and I'm going to read here very specifically from some material that you had sent me here. At the heart of Driven Livin's approach is the belief in aligning life's spiritual, intellectual, and physical aspects. And you found a way to bring all three of these into kind of a codified way of approaching things. And I think it was called, and I did not highlight this, but I think it was something about sipping life, the sip. Yeah.
Sip life slowly.
Sip life slowly. That's it. Sip life slowly. Talk to me a little bit about that. I came across that and went, sip life slowly. That's kind of an interesting take.
Okay. I'm so excited to talk to you about this because it's fascinating how it came to me and how it has continued to evolve into something that is so synchronistic. But let me go back a little bit, Blaine, because something came to mind when you talked about how the life of someone, right? And what came to mind was the first time I saw a dead body. And that's sheltered from society so much in the US. And so people don't really get to come in contact with that unless, unfortunately they just do, or they're in a medical field or the first responding field. So I was in first responding field, and the first time that I saw a body, there's nothing like it where there's a physical body there, but it's hollow. Yeah. And you sense this hollowness. And if it was recent, you'll even sense the spirit there. Mm-hmm. And so that was my experience. But when you talked about just giving life to something and someone, the soul aspect of ourselves, I liken it to that. Because yes, there's the physical aspects of ourselves, the intellectual aspects of ourselves, but you have to have it all. And you do have it all when we're here, at least on this physical plane, right? But they are all different. So when it comes to sip life slowly. Yeah. So I'll say a few things about that first. It's in order, as it should be, because if it were the other way around, no one wants to piss on themselves. So it has to be
very cute.
SIP. And so the spiritual leads first. And, sip life slowly. The slowly aspect of that is because so often, and you talked about it a little bit, when we put so much on us and we're living in this really fast-paced world. And yes, fast pace is great for us physically during certain time periods. But if you're continuously doing that, the body isn't designed to. It has to have the rest, the restoration. And so that's why sip life slowly. That is to remember to do things slowly, to go within, to meditate, to slow down that system in order to revive it.
I like that. I like that. Yes. Spiritual, intellectual, physical, sip life slowly. When it comes to managing stress, now you host a show, the Wellness Driven Life Show. When you're interacting with your clients, but also with your broader community, the idea of slowing down, people don't, I mean, they can appreciate it cognitively, intellectually, but in the midst of, the driving need to succeed that most of us have kind of built into our psyches and into our models of how to lead a business or run a business or participate in a business, what's the ways that give me some examples here about how you've actually worked with some folks to actually get them to a point where they go, here's something I can do that will facilitate this, and here's the consequence of that.
It really does begin with having to slow down and quiet down. So my technique is through hypnotherapy, to go within, to speak with the unconscious. So it relates to the conscious mind eventually. But people really draw their own conclusions and their own ideas from within themselves. But it's getting to that point where you slow down enough to be able to do so. So we can't access our creative minds and our creative selves unless we have slowed down enough and calm enough to be able to do so. Some of the greatest minds in history, such as Einstein, took a lot of naps. And so for somebody as brilliant as that and continuously was in creation mode, there were some of the techniques. I think there's another example. I just watched a documentary on Napoleon. And so
I saw that
with all of his battles, he used to take naps, right? Or appeared as if he was taking naps, and people were like, what is this dude doing? But his success, based on his being able to think and correlate the perfect moves, was just brilliant. And so those are some ideas of being able to access that creative self by, having to slow down and going inward. And when we sleep, right, our dreams, getting to those points with our minds is really, really vital for, creating more success in our lives.
Thomas Edison used to do this as well. I mean, he had I've actually been to his, the rebuilding of his studio, his laboratory, and the rocking chairs there, that he used to sit in. And he would, the story goes, and I think it's an accurate story, but he would sit there and he would rock, and he would hold a pen in his hand. And there's a liminal space between being cognitively awake and aware of everything that's going on, and then that unconscious state where I actually go to sleep. In that space between, right before, that was the one that he was interested in, and he would kind of rock himself into that motion, and he would hold this pen, and he would feel himself go into that space. But if the pen dropped, he knew he'd gone too far. And the sound it was a wooden floor, and he would hear the sound, and it would wake him up, and he'd start again. But he wanted to be in that liminal space there where ideas came in, but he had to slow himself down to get there. As a hypnotherapist, practitioner of this area, how do you work with people to, and I'm going to ask this question in this way: one size doesn't fit all. Well, how do you, what's the ways in which you work with people so that they find their own way of doing this? Because they can't get on the phone with you all the time or do a Zoom call and say, hypnotize me, do me. Yeah. That's
Well, we live in an incredible day and age where we get to meet on a Zoom, where I can have this incredible experience with my clients, as long as they're in a safe place, where they're not going to fall over, when because you go into a very deep, relaxed state. One of the things that I would say to that is that the approach that I take is really, really personalized, and it gets me very excited. So I'm glad that you asked that question, because the way that I do it is I ask my clients, I say, what is one of the most perfect days? Describe your perfect day. What is that like? And I go there, I have them go into the utmost detail, and I keep asking them questions. So I ask them questions initially about what they want to achieve, right? What things they want to change, what new habits do you want in your life? But more specific than that, when we go into the deep relaxed state and I lead them into that hypnosis, it's their personal story. It's their personal dream. It's their personal perfect relaxed day, right? So, some people, it's interesting with clients, and at the beginning, I did use just the standard, here's a script. But I found that some clients were like, oh, I don't like water. I don't like the ocean. And so that wasn't a good fit for them, right? But they did love horses, mountains, a different scene. And so that's why I started asking what specifically they wanted to hear. And that just leads somebody into an even more deeply relaxed state. And so what that does is, because they're going deeper and deeper and deeper, that makes things sticky. And so when you talk about building new neural pathways in the brain, it just gets you there so much quicker. So I get really excited about that personalization.
That's beautiful. I love that. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, because you've triggered something in my mind that has to do with the use of the imagination. And I want to ask you a couple of questions about that when we come back. Oh, folks have been listening to April Chavez here. Driven Livin is the name of her company. The Wellness Driven Life Show is what she hosts on a regular basis. We're going to talk more about that as well when we come back. So stay tuned. The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Welcome back, folks, and thank you for paying attention to that little commercial message there. I hope it triggered something in your imagination about what possibilities might be. And speaking of imagination, in which we were before we went to the commercial and coming out of the commercial here, the idea of imagination, one of the things that Carl Jung said, without the play of the imagination, nothing of consequence ever came into being. And I've always loved that quote. I heard that years and years and years ago. And it occurred to me actually some time ago, that imagination in the way that children use it, not in the way that most adults use it, but imagination, when it's really utilized well, actually becomes the gateway into the soul. It lives at the threshold of the soul. In the driven living life, in the wellness driven life, more specifically here, where do you find the play of the imagination really coming into its own?
I love what Stephen Covey said about begin with the end in mind. And we can't get there until we have some imagination of where we want to be and where we want to go. And so that's a big part of where it's an essential piece to being able to go anywhere. And when we talk about creating our own realities, that's, again, that essential piece is that imaginative place. There's been a lot of ideas of having a couple of parts that really create this incredible life. And it's being curious. So having imagination, being curious, wanting to discover things, stepping into the unknown, but being curious about it. And I think that we have to have the imagination at play when we do that, because it invites this different aspect of ourselves where instead of fear of the future, it takes us to a different place. And what is it? Excitement and fear are at the same vibrations, right? And so it's just knowing that, I think, is a really big key. And so being able to switch that when you remember that those are truths.
That's, the idea. Yeah, fear and excitement. Yeah, physiologically, they are exactly the same experience. The only difference is the switch in the brain that says, my God, I'm going to die, or wow, this is kind of interesting. But physiologically, it's the same sort of an experience. I'm going to take you back real early in your life here. You had a life-threatening disease, lupus. And I know, just based on some conversations we've had, but also some of the things that I've learned about what you're up to, that was a life transformational and kind of a nexus experience for you, if I could use that word here. How have you used, and I mean literally used, the experience of being, number one, being diagnosed with lupus, but then number two, having to transition and navigate everything that kind of came with the dis-ease, so that you became more eased in your life?
I think one of the biggest lessons out of that is there's not a whole lot of ease in life, period. Or it is something that is, as we grow older, as we gain more wisdom, yes, then. But I think that something that is unique about me that is fortunate in an unfortunate circumstance is that I was so young. I was diagnosed at 15 with systemic lupus. I've had symptoms since birth. So a lot of the stuff that went on health-wise was when I was real young. I think between 8 and 10, it was not good. There was not a great possibility of me surviving, but I did, because I'm here. And I think that through that, because I was a child, I didn't want that to define me right off the bat. And the resilience of a child, if you've seen children with leukemia or some sort of disease, the bravery, the way that they address it, where they have this sense about them where a lot of them, they don't fear death, not in the way that we do as adults. There's a difference there. I remember that when I was a teenager, my mom brought me to a support group for lupus survivors. And I was the only teenager in there. The majority of the people were 35 and above. And so I felt really awkward. I refused to read up on the disease. I didn't want to know about it. And I think I knew early on just not to allow that into my subconscious. because then what realities could I have made? And so I saw a big difference there early on. And I was like, no. I just want to be like the other kids. I just want to live my life. I have plans. I've got things to do. So yes, things were difficult. Yes, I needed to push myself far greater than the average person physically. And I think that's also what led me into male dominant fields and law enforcement, because I didn't want it to define me. I didn't want them to say, oh, she's not going to live to see 30, or she can't have children, which I have 3 daughters who are very healthy and they're beautiful. And they told my mom I wouldn't make it to see 30. She told me that a couple of years after my 30th. I just celebrated my 40th birthday. So, surpassed all of these things, all these statements that if I would have allowed them to be truths for me, what would that look like in my life? I wouldn't be here right now. I certainly wouldn't be with you here sharing this stage. So I would say too that the disease really wanted me to be something greater. And I pushed myself pretty hard to prove otherwise. And I did all those things.
This is the epitome of what I would assume to be a wellness-driven life, not an illness-driven life.
Yes.
And I'm struck here by not allowing them to be truths. Yeah, there's something about that phrase, not allowing it to be the truth that defines me, that speaks to agency, that speaks to, if I'm looking through the lens of being a performance coach as an example, other people's opinions of me really, screw it. Who are they to tell me what I can and can't do? Who are they to tell me what I can and can't have? Who are they, whoever they may be, that define my life or my business? Yeah, the idea of truths, and I want to, this is kind of an interesting thing. People talk about the truth all the time. And I started exploring this some time ago. As far as I can tell, the truth is only the truth if it's true everywhere all the time. And if it's not true everywhere all the time, it's not the truth. It's just an assumption that I've made, solid, and now it's controlling some of the stuff that I'm doing. This idea of lupus being, and I really paid attention to how you described it. It was a disease that I had. It didn't define who I was. Mm-hmm. And that identity, that lack of identity with it. Yeah, we identify with what we call the truth, but we don't really examine what we call the truth. And that gets us in a whole world of hurt, particularly if we're looking at a driven living sort of an approach to life. What are we driven by? We think it's the truth that it has to be this way. Yeah, I'm just on a pedestal right now riffing, but I'm not sure that I have a question anywhere here. I'm just inviting a conversation around this.
Well, let me add to that.
Please.
We it's difficult to find what the drive is. It can be for some people. Something that I've learned throughout this course of my life, I started seeing things that came up on a consistent basis, or patterns, I should say, when I had a flare-up, when I wasn't doing well. And so I noticed that was during times of high stress, of major transformation in life, transition, traumas. And so that about 6 months later, I'd get very, very ill, major flare-up, hospitalization, what have you. And so as I started noticing this throughout my life, I came into contact with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and started learning more about I do too. I'm a huge fan. Talk about him a lot, but the internal messaging. I say stress is the number one killer. I've said that for a long time, but let's go deeper than that. Because yes, stress is the number one killer, and that stress is tied to emotion. And those emotions become beliefs, and that becomes our truths. Mm-hmm. So those are the things. That's the biggest killer. it's not about the external. It's not, the near death experiences that we're facing physically. Is the internal racket that we have continuously playing on and on and on. And until we learn that and recognize that and understand that that is what our body is doing, then we don't put a stop to it, because that's how our bodies are like a robot controlled by the mind.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening. But when we start realizing that and understanding that, it's a lot easier to, when we experiencing something that is unpleasant to us and we don't care for, or a car accident happens, if we know that, then we stop playing it right off the bat, and we say, okay, I'm not going to continue that scene in my mind. I'm not going to make this a trauma in my life where I keep reliving the same circumstances. So that's what I would add to it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, as far as I can tell, the primary cause of old age is habits. a lot of the habits we engage in don't keep us alive. They actually kind of put a lid on, back to the spirituality, the expression that wants to come through. Where does the role, and this is kind of a segue into, we're going to have to wrap up here, but, where does the role of a hug come in? And there's something that, we want to talk about with the hug, but where does the role of a hug actually come into play with this?
Well, I always like to put new tools in my tool belt. And so my husband and I created an ebook. It was our first ebook together, and it's called The 7 Reasons to Hug Yourself. And so we did a lot of research. We put a lot of science behind that, and hugging ourselves, just the squeeze, it starts creating those endorphins that we want, the feel good, the security that we want to feel and need to feel as human beings when things don't feel good in life. And so it's just a feel good, another tool in your tool belt sort of thing that we offer to our audience. And as we continue to build Driven Livin, that is a free resource that we've given to our audience, and inviting them to be a part of our email list so they learn more about all of the other stuff, like the guests that we have the show, the behind the scenes, so to speak. We have so many incredible guests on our show, such as yourself, that give so many tips. And Blaine, I have all of these little sticky notes in front of me from your particular episode, because I loved all of the things and ideas that you had to say, especially when we talk about, right is a wrong way to think and things like that. And what is truth? And truth is something that worldwide consensus, not just the general or the location that you're at. And that plays a huge role too, right? Where every single location and pockets of people, they all have different truths and different ideas and different beliefs. And so what truly is truth, right? So let's go global on that.
It would make things a whole lot easier if we could all get consensus around that, I think. Where can people get a copy of the book? Yeah, the URL. Yeah, we'll get this in the show notes.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
When you go to www.drivenlivin.com, there's a pop-up that comes up and invites you to get a copy of the hug book for yourself. And so that's the easiest way to do it. It's right there ready for you.
Okay, we'll be sure that that's in the show notes. Folks have been listening to April Chavez, the CEO and founder of Driven Livin and the host of the Wellness Driven Life Show. April, I've loved this conversation. This has been great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Folks, as we close off here, just a gentle reminder, one that I make all the time. In your life, going forward for the rest of this week, find a way to be a center of distribution in your life, not a center of accumulation. Find a way to be generous. Give what you've got away. It doesn't have to be money. It can be a smile. Give a hug away. Yeah. Give one to yourself. That'll work well too. And until next week, thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed the show. Take care.